Nebraska always used to talk down to Iowa, and now their actual goal of their program is to become Iowa. And the reason why they haven't became them this year is they're not disciplined enough. Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover the B10 West champs.
We're going to do a breakdown of the Iowa-Illinois game that clinched the West title. Then move into a preview of the Iowa-Nebraska game, then wrap up some picks. Talk about just a crescendo of a moment for Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz. This really put a stamp on Kirk's legacy. No matter where he ends up, this will be viewed as one of the best coaching jobs in modern-day college football. Yeah, you're not really stacking a ton of wins on top of each other that you're going to look back on with a lot of reverence, but when you're down your 5 best players and you've able to, withstand your son getting fired, and then, everything else that tied into the season, and all these questions on his longevity, and then to kind of cap it off with 4 or 5 wins in the past 6 weeks in just typical Kirk Ferentz fashion.
Yeah, and they'd be all described as coin flip games too, right? Just if you looked at total yardage for, Northwestern, basically any game. I think Rutgers is probably the only game you've technically controlled to the point where it felt like you dominated by the end of the game. Every single game has been in the margins. And if you would have said, the moment Cade tore his ACL, be like, all right, so you've already lost Lachey, Cade tears his ACL. You're going to lose Eric All 2 games later. You're going to lose DeJean for the last 2 games of the season. Your running back room is going to be a mess, but majority of the season with banged up players. What would you have said the record would have been? 7-5 at best.
Yeah,
8-4 would have been a great season.
Yep.
And, if you told a Hawkeye fan at that moment when Cade's on the ground that you're going to win the B10 West and you have a chance at 10 wins.
With a game to spare.
You would have thought they were crazy just based on those injuries.
Well, I think it's a proof of concept, and that's really how the game played out. You started off the game, had a pretty good start through quarter 1. It kind of fell apart between quarter 2 and quarter 3. But the body blows eventually played in.
Yeah.
They really stuck to the run game. I think that was the difference between this game and the Minnesota game. When you needed that late score, you could tell on that last drive the Illini defense was gassed.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, guys are getting walled down by 2 or 3 gaps, and your best player full head of steam.
And really, the game, it felt like Iowa controlled it early, but didn't capitalize on big plays.
Yeah.
Missing a field goal. Obviously, the missed extra point at the end of the game was huge. The start of the second half, when you had Castro drop a pick, that felt like a very timely play to make. You're down by 1 at the start of the second half.
Yeah, pressure in Paddock's face. He was throwing the ball to the wide side.
It was a classic why Iowa plays this style. It created the exact turnover it wanted to create, and it just didn't make the play. And then you go back, I think they ended up punting to us, and we had a few first downs, got in position to kick a punt, and we didn't down a punt at the 2-yard line.
Yep.
It was a hell of a punt by Torrey.
That was still when it was a 1-point game, too.
Exactly. So you had back-to-back moments of guys, we got to make these plays. This is what Iowa does. We when there's a ball to be caught, we make the play. When there's a punt to be down, we down it, within the 2-yard line.
Yep.
And we really fumbled the game for, a quarter and a half after that. After dropping those 2 plays, then, Illinois kind of sees momentum again, and to the point of where until that punt return that sets us up in a good position, they really controlled that second half in terms of momentum.
Well, that's where we would have went back and pointed to those exact plays.
100%.
And that's just such a funny part about Kirk's system, because even when you have a fully healthy team, we're still relying on making those plays. And when you don't do it, things usually don't work out.
Right.
But that punt, the Castro pick was backbreaking. That once you stack the missed pin, that's where it felt like, man, we're just not making the plays today.
Yeah. Because this offense, it's going to be able to go to the length of the field, probably once a game.
Yeah.
Like a 75-yard touchdown or a 50-yard field goal drive. It needs those opportunities to get at midfield. It needs the opportunity to catch a ball on their side of the midfield and then finish a drive. You don't want them going the length of the field 3 or 4 times.
But I think the biggest aspect of it, too, is that when you can get that deep punt, you can get them pinned at the 2 or the 4 or whatever, that leads to, a quick punt from them. Right. And the way we coach a punt return, I don't think we really even got an opportunity to see our punt return game that whole game, just by the necessity of us being backed up and other things that happened. But that punt return that happened was just so well blocked.
Yeah. We were in the stands for the game, and right when the punt left his foot, the gunners on the Iowa sideline, there was 2 of them, and they were both locked up, hip to hip with Iowa players. I'm like, all right, we have a great shot at this. I think their far side gunner had more of an opportunity to make a play, but just by within the first 3 seconds of the kick, you could tell that we had a great return, in place.
Yeah, he actually might have went the wrong way.
He could have.
He had more to his left than he did to his right.
I could have maybe on like a first defender basis.
Yeah.
Maybe he had someone that was cutting off the far side or something like that.
Yeah. I don't think it was his fault. Just if he could have actually got over to the left side, I think it might have been maybe a house call.
It's definitely set up. So I guess it's time to get into the defense.
Yeah, defense versus their offense. I was surprised by how well they executed their game plan. We went into the game saying, they're going to be thrown over the middle of the field. We don't think they're going to do it at a really high level. They actually ran their RPO scheme almost to perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple times you had linebackers dropping down to stop the run. And they throw, they had that Isaiah kind of delayed slant over the middle.
Mm-hmm.
They had ran other slant routes out of that. If we would have lost this game on rewatch, there's probably, 2 or 3 different times where Illinois offensive linemen were at least 2 to 3 yards downfield.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually there's one play in particular I'm thinking of where a guard for Illinois was doubling up to Nick Jackson.
Yeah.
And he was about to block Nick Jackson and the ball goes over Nick Jackson's head. It's like, okay, you can't, this is just truly unfair. Like you can't be playing this game. I'm surprised he didn't get called. Usually Ferentz is really on top of that. He gets that communicated to the refs, but they had at least 3 plays where they had a legal man downfield on completions for them.
Yeah. And we made the comparison in the pregame to Tanner Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
And watching Paddock play, probably the best QB play I've seen against Iowa in a while.
Yeah.
Stats didn't really reflect it in the first half, but, he had a point there late in the first half to the end of the game where he really kind of felt his rhythm. Until we started batting down passes, he was kind of on target, on point, throwing catchable balls. Our defenders had to make great plays on the ball consistently, and he just threw, a very catchable ball at all times.
Yeah, and even though the defense still did give up that 1 touchdown, it was kind of a play that really shouldn't have happened. They had him in a 2nd and 10. I think it was around the 18-yard line. We brought both of our linebackers and dropped Evans into coverage, and Schulte was actually rolling down to, I think he was rolling down to a curl zone.
Mm-hmm.
Where the miscommunication happened was that Schulte and Evans both went with the running back to the flats, and then the tight end just sat down at 5 yards. And even in that scenario, X just had to make that tackle.
Yeah,
and that's. I mean, we talk about this like missed tackles happen all the time in college football, but when you are a team that's going to play by the margins, especially around the goal line, you cannot have missed tackles. I'm sure that'll be taught up like, hey, you kind of went for the big hit here, just secure this tackle.
Right, because if you tackle them at the 7-yard line, the difficulty in even just percentage touchdown rate is exponential from the 7-yard line to the 2.
Well, and just what that team could have offered too.
Right.
They would have probably had to go to Isaiah in some kind of screen game because you can't run Paddock there. Your inside zone's getting demolished. Paddock's really not a big arm guy. So
it's gonna be tough to execute for sure.
They would have been in great shape. That was one of those if you had a loss there, that'd be a play you go back to and be like, man, that was a
small detail,
a giant error.
Yeah. I think it's time to talk about the cornerbacks and what we saw from them. I think it was a game where you see what the new Iowa defense will look like without Cooper. We kind of reverted back to our old style of, having off coverage, even in 3rd and 2s, where we were being a 7-yard cushion on a 3rd and 2 that they can run a slant route against.
Yep.
Jamari, playing the system for as long as he was, and it being his senior day, he probably played the best game of his career in terms of making plays on the ball. I think Iowa had 12 deflections or pass breakups during the game, which it felt like that. It felt like there's a lot of bang plays. And the Illini made a lot of plays on the ball too. They made some tough catches on the situations. But Deshaun Lee, he had moments of, holy cow, what a play by him. We talked about that one wheel route that they ran against him where they're trying to drag him inside on the outside receiver and then run a running back, or was it a tight end?
It was a tight end that play. It's actually a tight end the first time where they called the PI and then called it back. I think it was actually a receiver the second time when he almost made the pick. But both times, that was intentional. You have a fresh corner out there. You're trying to catch him with the post wheel combo.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing to decipher. Both times he passed it well on. I think the biggest thing for me too is that he was, in both those moments, he was a standstill corner with a guy coming at him with pace.
Yeah.
And that just shows his athleticism. That's what we saw in his recruiting tape back in the day, was just how quick he was in small spaces. If you could design a cornerback to have one attribute, it's being very fast in a quick manner.
Especially for our defense. And the ability to get his head around that one play.
Yeah, I mean, that was just perfect.
I think I wanted to tweet this out before the game. It was like, Deshaun Lee it's going to be a learning curve for a little bit here. Just like Jamar early on, even Cooper to a sense.
Yeah.
It took him 2 games to get going, but still his first 2 games. he will be an all Big Ten player one day.
Yeah.
Like the cornerback position room at Iowa, it's been recruited well. You haven't really had attrition at that position for a while. Deshaun Lee will be an all Big Ten, preseason, first team all Big Ten player when he's a senior, just based on his makeup of a player. And I think we anticipate that for Jamari. I think injuries and the gambling stuff kind of threw off his career a little bit. Now it seems like it's coming to an end. If Deshaun can take starting role next year, gets a full scope of, 13, 14 games next year, I think by his redshirt junior year, he's going to be playing at a very high level.
And just
even at the end of the
next reason year. For him too is just he doesn't abandon his teaching in big moments. Both those times when he followed that wheel route, he got his head around, followed with his hand, turned exactly the way he should have. And then earlier in the game, he got beat on a curl route where the guy kind of pushed off at the top of the route, and he was playing it safe. The guy ended up dropping the ball because the sun was in his eyes. But a big moment late in the game, he made probably one of the biggest plays of the game. He sat down on a curl. You see the guy coming out to him, and I don't know what tipped Deshaun that the curl was coming, but you could see he stopped his pedal before the other guy did, and then was there to make the play. And to do that as a redshirt freshman, where you're actually exercising your will and your thought on the game, that's a great sign for where he could be at in 2 or 3 years.
Definitely, it's time for the offense.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think it's interesting watching Deacon progress and being in the stands for that game. Credit to the receivers, honestly. Credit to Deacon for improving, but the biggest leap in the passing game has just been the ability of receivers to catch his ball.
Yeah.
And watching it, a few, 50 feet away from us from the catches that they had to make, sometimes behind them, sometimes high. He absolutely whips the ball. And I don't think we dropped a pass all game from the receiver room. And it changed our offense. Like we had very timely conversions, especially on the final drive to Ragaini. And he played, I think he caught, 4 balls where like I did not anticipate him just based on where it hit him and given this pace of it.
Well, the throws outside the numbers too is what just allows this offense to function. And he had at least one out route to Seth Anderson in a giant moment where it's like, man, if you're making that throw, it's going to be very difficult for us to get beat. And I think the biggest part of it is we didn't really give him a lot of opportunities. He just seized the moment. And that's like, even if Cade played in that game, I don't know if Cade plays that much better of a game. For like the numbers he actually put
I think he doesn't make his receivers make as many difficult plays.
Yeah.
That would be my takeaway.
Yeah.
But if you take Lachey all away from Cade and you make him play with these receivers, like it's going to be difficult anyways.
Well, now you're seeing really the receiver room kind of start to develop. Looking forward, you have Seth Anderson and Caleb Brown for next year. Bostic, I think, played 15 snaps. Lysco tweeted out.
I think that's what I really want to see the next 2 games is Bostic get a touch. See what he looks like in space.
Even if you're because you're only going to be playing 2 of them predominant amount of plays. We're going to be live 2 tight end running back next year.
Yeah.
If you have Caleb Brown and Seth Anderson, that's actually a core you can build around. That might not be, when you're playing those super high-end teams, but I mean, did Michigan trust the receivers against Penn State?
Right.
No. They still built it through their tight ends and run game. Like at the end of the day, college football is built through those players for the predominant portion of teams.
Yeah. The high-level teams, they play through receivers, and the spread teams do. But in the Midwest, that's what it's going to be built through.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because we mentioned it in our preview, but we said the game's going to come down to how well our receivers can catch the ball over the middle of the field.
Yeah.
And then it came down to a Ragaini 3rd and 5 slant route.
3rd and 5.
And that really put the drive over get the Caleb Brown guy the next play. It was like after going back and watching that moment, I was like, wow, that actually that came to fruition where it was like one play.
Yeah.
Because if you go to a 4th and 5 there, add pressure to it, that might not work out.
You're probably kicking that deep, but we might only had one timeout left though.
Yeah,
one timeout. We're probably going for it no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a hell of a play. And it's great to see just like the offense like progress. Like from where I watched it against Michigan State, where you felt like, and then like you remove Eric All from that situation, like it was in a really bad spot. In the last 2 weeks, even going back to the first half of Northwestern, they didn't really have any opportunities against Northwestern because they just held the ball for so long. But like the last 3 weeks, like you can kind of see like those moments. You think of like the Caleb Brown catch in the end of Northwestern to win the game. And you think about Rutgers, like really like 400 yards of offense because that defense is a good, great production.
Yeah.
And then this game, timely drive. Yeah. Like had opportunities to score even more points.
The first 20 minutes of the game, the offense played really well.
Yeah. Deacon scrambled for a big 3rd down. Like there is growth. And like you have to give them credit. And it is Iowa growth.
Yeah.
It is the Iowa good production for offense. But like that's won us games and that's won us the West. So you can't like discount that.
It was a great moment to see Brian, mobbed by the team and just that moment for him, you could tell he was emotional in the moment. Obviously, Kirk's always emotional in those moments, but to be kind of ousted as like the black sheep of the coaching staff is like, we've identified you as a problem after Minnesota. You need to go. You are the reason this program can't be sustainable.
Yeah.
And then to just flip the script. And it's going to be interesting how Beth handles this because, I mean, the defense played well, but you also have to give credit to the offense these last 2 games. He's done it with his backup unit.
But yeah, you can also point to that 7 possession stretch where we punted after 6 plays 7 straight times.
Yeah.
So like there's moments to both. And he's still playing his backup QB.
Imagine you throw out almost any team within the West this year without their starting QB, top 2 receiving threats.
Yeah.
That's going to look rough for anyone.
Yeah.
And I still am glad we moved
if you took
out
out Isaiah Williams and Bryant off the line, what would they look like?
Yeah.
You take,
Take for Minnesota, take Jackson and Crooms out there or span forward. If you take Jackson away from Minnesota,
what would they look like?
What would they look like?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those moments where you have to kind of sit back and be like, Brian did a good job this year. He's going to end up being fired, but I bet he gets retained now. I think the move will eventually be for him to coach tight ends. And if Wallace ends up moving on to be a DC somewhere, then Abdul will move over to linebacker. But it's just, you got to give credit to them. Like they just won the West because of they had enough offensive production.
They had incremental growth. That's all you can give them credit for.
Yeah.
Like after watching that Michigan State game and then the next game after, like they were in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Very bad spot.
Yeah.
The Purdue game there were some moments.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think it's time to move on. Actually, we should talk about the Caleb Johnson run. It was just a straight counter play. Maybe Caleb Johnson's just a 4th quarter running back. That might just be a reality of what their plan for him is this year. You look, Sean and Patterson kind of eat up blocks early in the game. The last 10 carries go to Caleb. And he gives that, you think back to LJ Scott against Iowa. There's no reason to bring this up. It's a bad memory for Iowa fans. But 2015 Big Ten title game, LJ Scott got like 14 carries in the 4th quarter. And he'd have 1 carry the entire game. And there might be a reality where we just give Caleb Johnson 4th quarter carries just for those moments and the ability to house it.
Well, I think slow feed definitely helps him, and he definitely has an issue. I think I saw LaShawn in last game kind of coaching him up on gaps. And I think he's having a difficult time understanding where his cut's actually at. That's why they've actually moved on from him, is just because he's not playing the play correctly. But you see these moments where it's like, if you get him a well-blocked play, might not be anyone else in the country you want running that ball in that moment. Because he does such a great job at turning that pace. And then once he's there, he's a long strider with, a reach who can stiff arm you.
Yeah.
It just, he's also just not that great, like, while being tackled. You saw LaShawn at least 2 or 3 times in this game get hit and then carry the guy for 4 or 5.
Yeah, you watch Derrick Henry. Like, it's a crazy comparison to like say that he's the same player as him, but like it's a tall player. He doesn't have much of a lower body. Like his upper body is his strength. He's a tall runner. He doesn't get low when he runs. When you're hit at that and your center of gravity is up in your chest essentially and in your core, it's hard to get extra yardage. Like LaShawn's like center of gravity is like probably like in the middle of his legs when he gets hit. You can get more energy. So it's like just based on like how he runs, it's going to be hard for him unless he plays behind his pads really well to like get extra yardage.
That was such a good moment though in Kinnick.
Yeah.
It was very cathartic after what we had at Minnesota last time we were there. Kind of the game-winning play was taken away. For this one, once he got to the second level, it was just a foregone conclusion he was going to house it.
Right.
And
any Iowa fan knows.
It's one of those moments where you just feel like once he gets that second level, like here it is, we did it. Like just to see him finish that off.
Great down block by like Ostrenga's like been like making incremental plays in the passing game. Go back and watch Ostrenga's down block on that.
Yeah, and Richmond too. Richmond had a really nice down on. I think I was on Newton too.
Yeah, but Ostrenga's like we're gonna be relying on him a lot going forward.
Yeah,
and you always wonder about young tight ends' ability to block. Like play the game, play the season. He's driving a guy 4 gaps down and like making a huge play.
Well, before we move on, also I want to bring up our first touchdown. It's actually a really interesting design. You could tell it was, it looked like an off-schedule throw, but it was actually intentional. What we eventually did was we baited the play side corner. He was sitting in a squat corner playing the short route. And Ostrenga started on the left side of our formation, then ran like a quasi slant to the opposite deep right corner of the end zone. And then Deacon just baited the right corner and said, all right, I'm either going to throw high to you or low to the guy underneath you. And the corner saw it late, but he couldn't make it there. There's just really good red zone design.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of talking myself into being back on Brian. Again, that's a moment. It's like you can't run the ball on that. You're in a 3rd and 4, and you call the play that worked.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for him.
Yeah, good red zone play. I think it's time to move on to the Nebraska preview.
Yeah.
We are happy to announce a new sponsor for the ANF Podcast. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
Essentially the same team kind of playing each other this weekend. Like both teams, if they had their way, they'd probably be 15 pass attempts, 40 run attempts, play good defense. So like Rule's kind of made his stamp on Nebraska is to be Iowa. And we've always heard from Nebraska fans, like the goal, like when they talk about Iowa, like they always talk down to it. Like, well, you're never going to be able to compete with Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, because you're just not trying hard enough on offense. What is Rule's playbook is to be Iowa. Like, make no mistake. Like what he's doing, his top receiver has 32 catches. The next highest receiving target's Fedoni with 20-something catches. And then it's nothing. It's below 20 catches for any other receiver. The quarterbacks, all 3 of them, turn the ball over. There's 9 touchdowns with over 10-plus interceptions. And they all fumble and they all, don't have great stats. Generally, when they win, when they actually take the ball out of their quarterback's hands. So their goal of their offense and the goal of this program is to behave like Iowa.
Well, even their defensive linemen, 2 high safeties with off coverage.
Right.
Like their goal is to be a physical team who can stop the run because of how they feel.
Right. And so they're building out just like Iowa. And they're gonna have the same recruiting issues that Iowa's had. If if some recruit pulls up Nebraska's, stats this year offensively, where do they see, their future of, having a great quarterback season or receiver season? So, it's always been Nebraska like, oh, Iowa's not shooting high enough. Rule's shooting for 9 wins and 10 wins and to be competitive against like teams. And that's where, we thought it was a good hire for that reason, because he is actually trying to become Kirk Ferentz. He's trying to become PJ Fleck, where you have these run-heavy, defensive-focused teams, while Fickell's doing the opposite. Fickell is trying to recruit quarterbacks. He's trying to recruit receivers. And it's just interesting to see that, like, Nebraska always used to talk down to Iowa, and now their actual goal of their program is to become Iowa. And the reason why they haven't became them this year is they're not disciplined enough. Their turnovers are just too high. Mm-hmm. And that's truly the only difference.
Well, that'll probably be a product that they get figured out, and it's going to have to be around QB recruiting.
Right.
They're going to have to bring in a guy who's a little more judgment sound.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the year, I actually picked a loss in Nebraska because I thought Sims was going to be the guy that could run out. And what we saw from him early in the season against Minnesota, outside of the backbreaking turnovers and like defining his stay at Nebraska, he was that dynamic athlete that would have given Iowa a ton of problems. Mm-hmm. When Harburg got hurt, I was actually sad because I was like, they're going to go back to Sims, and if he's figured out the turnover thing, mm-hmm. We might have a real problem here. And then within 3 possessions of Sims, it was fumble that could have been avoided, and one of the worst throws I've ever seen in college football.
Yeah,
and he was gone again. It's like, okay, maybe
he has not figured it out yet.
Yeah,
because every time he touches the ball, it's incredible.
Yeah, and the under's 27. I think it's actually down to 26 and a half now, which is another record for us. I think it's easily going to go under, mm-hmm. which is a crazy thing to say because you're saying, okay, there's likely going to be 2 field goals. Mm-hmm. So that what you're betting against is 3 touchdowns in a full-length college football game.
Yeah.
There will not be 3 touchdowns. I think that's a safe thing to say. Mm-hmm. Just by how these guys play, I think it's kind of like playing Northwestern where you're going to have...
Very similar.
The flats are going to be available. Our boot game's going to work. Outside zone's going to work for the most part because they're not going to have edge rushers that can, really come off the edge and destroy us at D-gap. They're going to let us stay on schedule. Mm-hmm. They're going to, let us operate in that manner. Screen game's going to be there to both the receiver and the running back. But once you play this team in the red zone and they have a really good tackling secondary.
Yeah,
that's where we're going to have to either have some magic happen. But I think in this game, especially with how poorly Nebraska's offense is, we're really going to turtle up and just kick field goals.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going to see on the other side too. I think both teams are going to be terrified mm-hmm. of making the big mistake in this game.
Because a touchdown in the first half to go down 7-0, 10-3 could be devastating.
Well, with no ability to be explosive on offense, mm-hmm. You have to stack 3 60-yard drives or field goals to then retake the lead.
Right.
That's avoiding penalties, turnovers, mm-hmm. Missed blocks, all that. So you stack all that together, the coaching staff going into both games going to be like, man, if we could just not throw that pick, not mm-hmm. fumble, we're going to be in great shape.
Yeah. They're going to have a little bit of a game plan advantage just based on how they play. It does look a lot like Northwestern. 11 personnel, one tight end. But no matter who it is, they all can run. All the QBs can. And they want to run, option, read, QB power. And they have all the bodies to do it, no matter if it's Harburg or Chuba, or if they ever go back to Sims, which I don't see envisioning. But they all can get those, hopefully 3rd and 1s for them, or, QB draws. And given our sets we're going to run against them, most likely they'll have the ability to run them for 5 yards carry.
I think that is true, but after how Paddock played, I actually think an accurate QB is more of our kryptonite than a running QB in this year, just because we're built so small. Our linebackers and our safeties run so well and tackle so well.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're just going to see a very aggressive Iowa defense against them, especially without having, really any threat out wide.
Yeah.
Even for Deshaun Lee and Jamari, I don't think any of the receivers are going to give us real problems.
Kemp is a good player, and they will target him, but that's their only target that they can rely on. The rest.
But are they going to be eager to put the ball 10 yards downfield?
Yeah. Chuba's best throws are 10-yard ins, 15-yard ins.
Yeah, that's not a play that breaks for 40 a lot.
Right. They kind of had a lucky break tackle against Wisconsin that allowed that, but it's a similar kind of play like Deacon if it is Chuba, where it's like his best throw is like a vertical shot, 15 yards downfield. He's got a big arm, but it's a really long release.
Yeah. I just think we're going to line up very aggressive against them.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with the idea that, our offense is likely going to struggle against their defense.
Yeah.
If we can force a turnover in a big moment, granted, I don't know if we'll see that a ton between the 20s, just because, thinking back on this, you're probably just going to let them execute.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see if they make the mistake.
Yeah.
But if they're ever backed up, that's a moment where I think Phil could really, tap into some aggressive play calls.
They do have backs that can actually, make plays on top of the plays, like Anthony Grant and Emmett Johnson. They're both solid. They're not, say they're middle tier Big Ten backs. But if you give them a little space, they're kind of smaller guys. They can get you, for 20, 15. And I think this game really comes down to who's delivered more body blows in the fourth, because this will be a fourth quarter offensive game. Neither offense in the first 3 quarters is going to be like, we anticipate to score touchdowns. I think it's going to be, like you mentioned, it's a field goal game. But you get into the fourth quarter, just like we did against the Illini, just like Rutgers in a way, and you've kind of grinded them into the 30-yard runs or 30 runs on them already. That's where this game's going to be won. And, even hear Rule talk about it in the preseason. Like, their goal is 100 rush yards in the fourth quarter.
And I think it's 65.
Or 65, yeah. 60, something 60-plus yards in the fourth quarter. Kirk's iterated that probably 10,000 times while he's been at Iowa. Like, run the ball in the fourth quarter. And whoever has the lead and who has momentum and who has the ball, essentially, might be able to win the game, just because 8 minutes left, you're in 4-down territory, and these defenses are finally tired. Now they're susceptible to these schemes, because that's what these schemes are trying to do. They're trying to get to that fourth quarter.
Yep.
Either close out a game or win a game on the ground. I think that's where I see this game being played, unless there's turnovers.
Yeah. Unless there's an early turnover from either side, likelihood is you're just going to see a lot of run, punt.
Mm-hmm.
And both teams are going to be very comfortable in that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, they're both kind of like, well, we actually can kick this back.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll, F up.
Maybe they'll drop the punt. Maybe they'll throw the pick. Maybe they'll fumble themselves.
Right.
I think both teams are even just how quickly you can feel like that as an offense too. Like, once your offense gets in the field, like, just don't make the mistake. If you're feeling that as a fan, that's even like, that's 10 times for a coach.
Right.
Especially when you have such a good defense on the other end, which is both true for both sides.
Yeah. Very good. I mean, they're playing great football. And it really is like, outside of their 2 giant D tackles, like Ty Robinson and the polar bear or whatever they call him. There's not a lot of guys that stand out like, holy cow, that's a hell of a player.
Yeah.
They just play a very fundamental system. It's a multiple 3-3-5 essentially, where you're, they rotate into a nickel type set. They rotate into a 5-down lineman set, which we'll see all game. I'm guessing we'll see 3 true D linemen. They're not as big as the Illini are at linebacker, on their outside linebacker. So I think we'll have more opportunity to run like power sets against them, and just have more opportunity to like kind of get, extra yardage like early in the game. But the key to their defense is like how everyone plays hard. Like, we watched the first game.
That was when I was obsessed with Nebraska right away. Is their defensive style in that first game, just safeties coming downhill and making tackles at 3 yards.
Yeah.
When they're lined up 12 yards off the ball, it's like, man, it's a sustainable style.
Yeah.
If you can play back up and then come up and tackle well, and your guys are playing hard, that's just a very redeemable quality in college football.
Yeah.
I think Rule's got something really, really strong on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
If he starts to recruit talent to that group, you'll be looking at them as like a dominant defensive team for the next decade.
That's the next step for Nebraska. It's like getting, better on the offensive line, better in the running back room, and better on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he's kind of building this towards. And you definitely can envision, some of Iowa's best teams have those three qualities.
Yeah.
And that's where he's kind of like Matt Campbell, where he gets his first years, he gets the lumps because he can't, get the right mentality type of guys at all 11. But,
for it to be a defensive team right off the bat, they've had some decent defensive teams under Frost.
Right.
But that, coach that in right away and teach it well enough where they're not making mistakes, it's a great sign for their future.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how they grow. Yeah. I'm kind of glad they've built their team the way they have. I think, as you mentioned to start, they used to kind of turn their nose up at Big Ten football. And if you look at them now, they're essentially like the new Minnesota.
Yeah, they're embracing it completely.
Yeah.
And Frost had the wrong idea. We're going to go in there, we're going to chuck it around. We're going to be like Ohio State. We're going to be like Michigan. Well, I am in Michigan, but we're going to be like USC and we're going to recruit these great athletes. Just not going to happen in the Midwest. You have to focus on the right things and be not just good at them, but elite at them.
Yeah.
Be elite at turnover margin, be elite at special teams. And then if you can be intelligent about how you build your offense, like they have running QBs, they are playing a spread offense. There's a world where this kind of can turn into a great product and they can turn into a 10, 11 win team on a good year with a good schedule. It's just
protecting the ball better.
Exactly. That's their key.
Well, if you have a great defense, you can play in any game as long as you're not turning the ball over.
Yeah.
I want to move into some picks.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's pick the game first. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it actually opened up I think we opened up as 1.5 point favorites. Now it's down. Last I checked, it was Nebraska -2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I saw +1.5, but
yeah, right before we got here, it flipped to 2.
Wow.
It's just difficult for me to pick against Iowa. I know the crowd's going to be insane. It's bowl eligibility on the line. You might be pointing to Iowa having a lack of motivation, but it's a college football game.
Right.
It's a rivalry. Iowa's not going to lack any effort.
Yeah, and we can address, they're talking about Iowa City and players possibly. Do we know what program we're talking about here?
Yeah.
You think Joe Evans is I don't want to play against Nebraska.
Yeah.
Jamar Harris, I don't need another game on film for the NFL. I don't
and
care
it makes no sense in college football.
Yeah, it's just not a reality.
But I think if I had to guess, I think we keep them out of the end zone in this game. I even with Deshaun Lee, I think the defense is just playing so well, and I think Nebraska is going to kind of sell their own poison by not taking as many opportunities as they need to. What Illinois really did a good job of, when the moment struck, they kept throwing the ball.
Yeah,
I don't think Nebraska is going to do that. So, and I just like what we're seeing out of the Iowa offense, especially when you're going to have D gap available again through boot action, jet sweep, screen game. That's kind of where Brian has his full bag of tricks.
Yeah.
And if you can trust and rely on the defense, then special teams is probably going to lean our way. Drew Stevens has got to start making some bigger kicks, but he made a big one against Northwestern, but he's missed a lot of first quarter kicks. I think I'm going to pick the no touchdown 9-6 game.
Yeah.
I think I honestly think that under 27 is a very safe bet. It's the lowest one ever, but
I think it's 26 now.
Yeah, 26.5.
26.5, yeah.
But it's just schematically how passive both these teams are going to play.
Right.
And when Iowa gets to the midfield, they're going to be so willing to punt the ball. You're not going to get aggressive play calls at the 50. You're going to have Iowa run the ball at the middle, let's throw some body punches and punt it deep.
Yeah. And the fact that we have no pressure to win this game either.
Yeah.
We have essentially just, a singular moment. Kirk's let's just play our brand to its, nth degree.
Yeah.
Why would we change anything about our game plan for this?
The proof of concept has been established beyond belief.
And I think I'm going to go with 10-9 Iowa for the same reason. I think we'll punch in one late when it's 3-3 or something like that, or 6-3. We'll score a touchdown late, or maybe a pick six or a punt return. I think it's gonna be one of those games. But you described that game. There's just no way either team's gonna have success.
Yeah.
Outside of, I think Iowa. You're right. Iowa does match up well against Nebraska's scheme. The flats are open
because they're letting you stay on schedule.
Right.
And
they're
what
not trying to press you.
What we saw from when Iowa played Illinois, Illinois is the exact antithesis of that, where they're saying, we're going to speed you up from the minute the ball is snapped.
Yeah, Bielema created that system only to beat Iowa, essentially. He's playing that system to beat Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. Wisconsin changed their system because Bielema had trump card.
Yeah.
You're going to play 5 defensive linemen that can't move.
Well, 7 guys line up on the line of scrimmage.
Right. So we're just not able to run the ball because by alignment, there's 8 guys in the box before there's even the step-up safety.
Mm-hmm.
And Nebraska just doesn't have that scheme or that style to press Iowa, but Iowa's issues with like forcing it to our receivers on slant passes, forcing our receivers to make really difficult catches and then do something with it, which they weren't able to. They made 1 catch in space. Nebraska will allow us to feel more in the rhythm, more on our pace. And I think that will lend us to being, having a.
I don't think it's going to lead to a lot of touchdowns, but I think it's going to lead to a lot of first downs.
Right.
Which is what, again, drags that score down a lot.
Yeah.
Because we can't wait to punt away when we're on midfield.
And if Iowa can get first downs, generally it wins games.
Yeah.
Like if we can play actual complementary football, like we played against Rutgers, it's hard to beat us because it's hard to go 90 yards against our defense. It's hard to go in, 75. When you get those opportunities to get at the midfield, we're not getting first downs, we're backed up.
Yep.
It's different, but I think that's the key takeaways that we'll actually be able to play complementary football, even though we're not going to score a lot.
Mm-hmm. So get some picks?
Yeah. I'm going to do Iowa +2 in the under, and that's it. And that's how you end the picks.
Yep. I'll do the same.
Yep. Awesome.
All right. Well, go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Have a great Thanksgiving.